There's no rock bottom for the family members. It's a constant roller coaster ride, and one incident comes after the other. And just when you've got over that incident, another one arrives. So we're constantly running on adrenaline.
This is Rethinking Rock Bottom, a podcast that explores the complicated experience of loving someone struggling with substance use, hosted by Reverend Jan Brown and Dr. Carrie Wilkins.
When Dave and Tina tried to get help for their son, Craig, they found themselves in a catch-22.
The Substance Use Treatment Center told them that Craig needed mental health support. The mental health program said he needed to treat his substance use issues first.
Most of the time, mental health issues and substance use problems are co-occurring, yet treatment tends to fall into one camp or the other. This reality leaves families like Dave and Tina's searching for treatment options that just don't exist.
The stigma these families face is compounded since they are often blamed by treatment providers and by society for having caused the problem or faulted for not being able to fix the problem. This can be especially painful for parents who already feel isolated in their suffering.
Dave, a now retired broadcast engineer, was frustrated. He felt it was his job as a father to fix the problem, but he had no idea how to do it. And Tina, even though she worked with special needs children, felt overwhelmed by Craig's substance use and out-of-control behaviors.
As Dave and Tina tried to help Craig, their journey led them to learn new skills and gain self-awareness. They also found and fostered support for themselves and for Craig. They now run online family support groups from their living room in Birmingham, England, where they help parents like themselves.
Recently, we had a chance to sit down and talk with Dave and Tina, who were, as usual, side by side.
Yeah, we've been together a very, very long time. It's 43 years this year. We met when we were 18, just 18. Before that, Dave will fill you in on his history. I lived in the middle of the countryside and everything, and quite a shy little thing, quite naive and everything. So we met when we were 18, fell madly in love, knew the first week we'd be together. The year after we met, Dave unfortunately had cancer. And that was a real steep learning curve for us because, it cemented our relationship. Do you want to talk about your childhood, Dave, as well at that point?
As we said, we met when we were 18. Prior to that, I come from a children's home, so I was adopted by my new parents. My dad died when I was 15, which it was a real shame, because they were a wonderful family. And then obviously I spent some time, trying to keep the family together with my mum mourning and my little brother, which I wasn't really equipped with being a 15-year-old. So I think with both of us, we've got that compassionate side that we've struggled in our own childhoods. After a few years, we decided to have children, so we got married. And after, 7 years, was it, of infertility treatment, I says, well, we've had enough of this. Tina was really struggling. It was really affecting me. I didn't want to see her suffer anymore. And I said, it's a no-brainer for me. Let's just adopt a couple of kids. So we went through the adoption process and ended up with two boys. The first one was Craig. It's 2 years old when we adopted him. And the second one was Sean, who was about 9 months, was he, when we adopted him? A bit earlier.
7.
7 months, yeah.
So you were aware early on that Craig was a little different than some other children. And were there specific things that you saw, and how was that to have to respond to?
I was sort of equipped. I'd worked in paediatrics for quite a while, so I'd seen lots of sort of developmental delays in other little kiddies and everything. And we were pre-warned. We were told he couldn't speak, he could walk, but he'd never experienced walking on grass. And the first time I saw a temper tantrum, oh my goodness, he used to have white blonde hair and his red crimson face contrasting. That was at the beginning of, I think, what was going to be a slightly difficult time. Don't get me wrong, he had the happiest giggling laugh when he sounded like Bart Simpson when he laughed. And so he was a pleasure to have around. But when he went to nursery, he struggled with communication with the other children. So we had a few challenges there, the odd bite and things to express his frustration and things.
It was clear that Craig had different challenges than other kids. He was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which helped, but it didn't totally account for the complexity of his struggles. They did not understand that he had autism until much later in their journey.
When he went to school, we could see he was struggling and we really supported him. I worked hours and hours and hours at home with him. So I found that it was tough. And I'm saying it was tough for me because Dave was at work. And Dave was a lovely, 100% supportive dad and husband. You know, he was there when he could be. But it was always me that was, Mrs. James, we need a word with you. And he was really inattentive. He wasn't hyperactive. But they used to just put him on the landing and ignore him. So imagine the self-esteem and the self-confidence that was bashed out of him. So by the time he was 8, they acknowledged that, yes, there was a problem. I mean, we were dismissed by saying, they said, oh, we can't use adoption for an excuse, which we'd never done. And so they diagnosed him with ADHD. So it was a relief that somebody was listening. He was started on methylphenidate reluctantly, but it did really, really help him. In the meantime, he still showed the odd challenging behaviour. It was almost like he was a pressure cooker waiting to go off. And until that steam had gone, he just couldn't cope with his frustration and anger. So he settled down. We got loads of strategies. He calmed down. He went to secondary school and the consultant decided, oh, Craig, you're doing really, really well. Let's take you off the medication. Now, our naivety at the time was, okay, that's really good, isn't it? But
yeah, I mean, it sort of snowballed from there. He was at mainstream school, which he didn't feel he fitted in, because people on the autism spectrum are quite good at putting on a mask and trying to blend in with other people. But, in their hearts, they're really, really struggling. And we didn't sort of get wind that there was a problem because he was quite good at hiding his true feelings until his girlfriend at the time came to us and she said, I'm really worried about Craig. I think he's sniffing solvents. We did the usual thing that family and friends do is we, just Googled everything in sight, found the local services, and we dragged him always here to the local services. And they took him off into a room, sat us in the waiting room, and he came out, said, yeah, fine. And we honestly thought, oh, they've had a word with him, they've sorted it, it's not going to be a problem. Job done, proper mum and dad, I think they gave us acupuncture, didn't they, in our ears? That was our support, We'll take mum and dad and de-stress them with some acupuncture. But it turned out that we probably needed a lot more than that as time panned out.
Families often don't realize just how much support they're going to need as they cope with complex co-occurring issues. They also don't realize that every member of the family will likely be impacted in some way. Tina told us how Craig's brother Sean lost his first best friend over the course of Craig's struggles.
What we haven't mentioned really is our second son, who's 3 years younger. And this was having an impact on him because Sean was a very easy little boy, very articulate. He could go to school and he could sneeze and an A would drop out. He was, so, but we were obviously caring and loving and everything to him. But a lot of our focus sometimes went on our other son, on Craig. Mm-hmm. And that's something, if I could regret anything, knowing what I know now, I wish I hadn't have done that. But it's having 2 kids. It's not like just having 2 children. It's like being the diplomatic service, isn't it, really? So, yes, sometimes it was hard work. And parenting is hard work, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think you guys have articulated a couple of things that a lot of parents talk about, which is having the children who are not struggling, feeling like you're not able to give them the attention that you would because your attention is kind of on the problem or the thing that feels like, oh, this is the heartache in the family. And then you mentioned some ambivalence about the medication. You said there was some hesitancy to put him on medication and then relief that he was able to get off the medication. And I think that's just another thing that is such a tough decision for parents is when to use medications and just all the feelings that come along with that. Those are hard decisions.
He was hard carry because at school he was struggling and they were calling us in, and he was a lovely little boy, don't get me wrong. He wasn't, I don't like using the word naughty at all, but he wasn't, disruption to anybody. It was more himself that was suffering. And when we went into them and we said, he's got ADHD and we're going to start him on this medication, they said, we don't use the R word here. And it was almost that stigma of the school was just so frustrating to us. And I thought, actually, we're his parents and we know he's struggling and we felt his pain and we're going to help him here. As you'll hear later, it's just another fight that we had to struggle with. And, we are articulate, we are resourceful, but when you know you're doing the right thing and people put seeds of doubt in your mind, you think, am I doing the right thing?
The shame people feel for having these sorts of problems can be profound, and it can make it difficult to ask for help. Additionally, each member of the family has their own temperaments, emotional reactions, and ways of approaching a problem.
Tina was in the action stage, and I was still in the pre-contemplation stage for quite a while. And things really started to improve when we were both in the action stage, and it took me a while to catch up. And that's common with lots of men as well. It can be the other way around as well, but with men, we sort of let it go a little bit longer and just see what happens.
It was difficult for Dave because he was quite angry. I mean, neither of us are angry, shouting parents at all, but you were really angry and frustrated about the situation, weren't you? And as many parents, you take it personally. You think they're just playing you up just to spite you as a teenager, or they're sort of flexing their muscles and independence as a teenager. But I was getting extremely anxious, extremely tearful. It was really, really affecting both of our sleep, wasn't it? And I think the reason Dave was angry is because he was really worried about me. He was worried about Craig, but he was worried about the effects it was having on me too. But what he didn't realise is I was worried about the effects it was having on him as well.
When Dave talks about the stages of change, he's talking about the 5-step model. Pre-contemplation, where I'm not even thinking about making changes. Contemplation, where I'm starting to think I might need to make a change. Preparation, where I'm starting to plan for the steps I need to take to make those changes. And the action stage, where I'm taking specific steps toward those changes. And this is all followed by the maintenance stage, where I'm doing what I need to do to maintain the changes I've made.
When Dave did spring into action, he admits he thought it would be a quick fix, but he underestimated the reality that Craig would be going through his own stages of change, and it would take a while longer for him to move into the action stage.
When Craig started taking his substances, Dave thought, oh, great, I'll fix him. I'm going to drag him to an NA group. I'm going to take him to that NA group and he will get fixed. And so it was almost you go to this NA group or else. And we all know that, ultimatums and things like that don't work at all. And how did it go, Dave?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't know what I didn't know. To me, the only thing I knew about people that use drugs was the stuff on the media, which wasn't good. So I was really nervous about going to this group in the winter, in the dark. I was very nervous. And when they started to share and speak, I thought, oh my God, they're such lovely, lovely people. And this is such a great group and they're supporting each other. And I learned a lot from it, At the end of the group, I said to Craig, oh, what do you think of that one? You're brilliant. He goes, what did you send me there for with all those addicts? And he was at the wrong stage of recovery. That was something that wasn't going to work at that stage of his recovery. Furthermore, I put him off groups because I'd taken him, forced him to a group at the wrong time, not because there was anything wrong with NA or any of the other groups. So, yeah, you learn these mistakes, don't you?
When did things start changing again?
Well, Jan, they got worse before they got better. Craig was at this point when he was 19, still living at home with us. Actually, just before his 19th birthday, he was exhibiting quite severe mental health problems. He was having suicidal ideation. At one point, we actually had to go in his bedroom and he was trying to hang himself. So that was a horrible thing because a younger son had to witness that as well. And then Craig became quite aggressive verbally. He didn't actually hurt us, but he was very threatening, wasn't he? And he went into mental health crisis quite a few times. We were always either having the police car outside the house, which they were very good because they always used to contact the ambulances.
I mean, at no point do we stop loving our son, but we could recognise that it was the substance use that was causing the problems with our son. And that little boy that we adopted and brought up was no different to our other son. You know, they both had the same schooling, they both had the same parents, went on the same holidays, but the behaviour was out of control and it became quite threatening. We had failed to get suitable support from the recovery services. We tried just about everything, because most people say, I've tried everything, you know. And it was probably 4 years in before we actually went to an Al-Anon group. There's never really a rock bottom. At that point, I was on my knees and I wanted to talk to some strangers about it. And the first thing I did when I walked in, I says, I'm really sorry, this Al-Anon group, do you do drugs? Because all I knew is that they did alcohol, you know.
For sure.
And the lady there was, well, there was a couple there, and they're absolutely wonderful. And they said, come on in, do you want tea or coffee? And we sat there and we listened to the shares, and I realised that it didn't actually matter what the drug of choice was. Alcohol, gambling, heroin, the families go through exactly the same. So we did feel quite at home there. And it was the first group of people that actually sat and listened to us and understood what we were going through. So that was a huge step for us.
Groups are a big part of the story for both Dave and Tina, but in particular for Dave, who eventually found himself left in charge of many of the groups that he regularly attended. As Craig's drug use intensified, these open, non-judgmental spaces were an antidote to the isolation Dave was experiencing at work, as the stigma around drug use led him to suffer in silence. For Tina, who was on the front line daily with Craig's emergencies, there was no escape, particularly since she worked at the same secondary school that Craig attended. Eventually, Tina reached a breaking point, and they moved Craig to a hostel, hoping that some space and independence might help. But the difficulties only increased.
Craig, by this time, was a polydrug user. He was trying things like MCAT, cocaine, the Mamba, the psychoactive substance. And so he was in a really bad way, a really, really bad way. And I think that the turning point for me, perhaps, was somebody had kindly given him a bottle of methadone, and he drank the lot. He drank the lot. And the hostel he was living in, they rang me and they said, Craig's not responding to us. And I said, for goodness sake, please call an ambulance. So we called the ambulance. We sat next to him. It must have taken an hour before anybody put an naloxone dose in. And then they put another one. And we were watching his respiratory rate drop. And I think Dave and I, because we were so close, we were looking at each other thinking, if you're going to go now, go now. Because it was just so painful for him and so painful for us to watch. And the next day I went off sick. I thought, I can't work with children. I can't support other people while I need to support myself.
I genuinely left the hospital at 3 a.m. in the morning with Tina, having seen him flatline and having known he was in hospital. My shift at work was at 8 o'clock the next morning, and I didn't think, because of the stigma of drug use, that I could go to work and tell my boss that, what had gone on. So I just sat there like a zombie. I think they call it presenteeism, don't they? Where you're not in a fit mental health state, you're exhausted, but you still turn up at work. And this is part of the stigma and isolation we feel as family members is, that Al-Anon group were the only people we could talk to. Nobody at work understood. The fact that other people at work might have even been going through it as well, but you wouldn't know because it's not the sort of thing that men talk about. Because really it's, everybody on Facebook's got wonderful families, haven't they? And they eat at fine restaurants and go on great holidays. And, it's not something you can broadcast to the world that, your son is really, really struggling. And even though it's not your fault, it's very, very difficult. But eventually I did give in, and I did tell my manager what was going on. And he was actually really, really supportive because he had 2 children of his own. So he knew me, so he knew it wasn't, because I'm a bad person. There's just the 2 of us that knew. So from then onwards, he said, look, Dave, if there's any emergencies, just let me know. Just give me the nod and you can go and sort him out.
And following on from that, I was at home, I was off sick, and I went on Dr. Google, and I was Googling when I was meant to be resting with this stress and everything. And I've been going to the doctors, and I found SMART, and I found, I discovered craft, and I said, this sounds like it would really fit. And at the same time, Craig had actually been admitted to hospital because he was psychotic with his drugs. And so he spent 12 weeks in hospital, during which he was diagnosed, I think we mentioned earlier, with autism. So not only did he have ADHD, but he also had autism, which actually explained an awful lot. And all the jigsaw pieces were coming into place.
With the autism diagnosis, Craig's behaviors started to make sense. In fact, it had been Craig who wanted to understand it, since he recognized some of his own behavioral patterns in friends who identified with being on the autism spectrum. Following this round of treatment, Craig's drug use stabilized a bit and his emergencies became more infrequent. At the same time, Dave and Tina were trying to prioritize their relationship as a couple and with their son, Sean, whose needs often got overlooked as they focused on Craig. All of which led to a turning point on Sean's birthday, when Craig called Tina in a panic after taking drugs.
And so he rang me in the morning, and you are ambivalent. You want to go there and help him, but you want to be with your other son whose birthday it is. And so he rang me and he said, Mum, I've done something really daft. He said, I've taken something. And I said, what have you taken? And he said, such and such. And he said, my heart's beating very fast, but I've called an ambulance. I said, that's absolutely fantastic, Craig. I've called an ambulance. They're on their way. They'll look after you. And I said, and if they need us to come to the hospital, we'll come. Because what we'd done before was always drop everything for Craig. And then later on, he rang us. He said, I'm getting really lonely here. And I said, right, okay, we've got a choice here, Craig. I said, we've got a choice in that it's your brother's birthday and we don't spend much time with him. Or we come to the hospital after you've decided to do this today. And he said, I see what you mean, Mum. Stop at home with Sean. And the turning point for him is he saw, we've got a hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital around here, and it employs lots of people from the military. And he saw a military doctor. Well, he immediately had this respect for this lady doctor who's dressed in full camo and everything. And she said, if I ever see you step in this hospital again, having taken that stuff, you are going to be in such big trouble. And to that day, he hasn't touched that stuff, which is amazing, isn't it? That something is what I would say as small as that, after we'd been pleading and begging all those years, made him change.
I'd also add to that that lady wouldn't have gave him a dressing down if Mum and Dad had been in the room.
Oh, that's interesting. Sure.
Yeah, sometimes some of those natural consequences really do work, and you don't really know which one's going to work. You just have to try things. Some do, some don't.
It's interesting. That was a part of my story as well, as a person in recovery. When I kind of got out of my parents' reach and had started having some of those natural consequences, that's when I was able to begin to make some changes as well. So that's a really powerful point that you made. Thank you.
The skills Dave and Tina used in this moment speak to all the work they had done leading up to it. They were able to use self-awareness to stay calm and communication skills that were kind and supportive. They also very skillfully linked his choice of using drugs to being in the hospital and explained to him that they also had a choice to make, and they were choosing to stay with Sean on his birthday.
It is clunky when you start using these skills, but the more you do practice, and people say, how do you use it? What do you say? I don't even think about it anymore. It has to flow within a conversation. I don't go out and say, right, today I'm going to use my motivational interviewing on my son, or today I'm going to, be very specific about what I want. It just happens, doesn't it? It evolves.
The listening is the most important bit. So we don't have to have the answers. And our answers aren't actually important. It's their answers that are important. And that motivational interviewing is a way of getting them to communicate their answers, which you can then reinforce and go, do you know, that's a really good idea, Craig. You know, we could do that, couldn't we? Is there anything we can do to help you along with that? It's more in tune with my values as a dad. I want to be a proper dad. You know, I've adopted a boy. I was adopted. That's me. I'm going to be the best dad I can possibly be for him. And if I have to learn some tools about it to get there, then I will learn those tools.
Family members are usually quite desperate to help their loved one, yet they often don't have the skills they need to be effective. They are frequently told they should not enable, and that they should address their codependency and detach themselves. This creates distance and disempowers families, when in fact they can be enormously helpful in supporting their loved one to make positive changes. Thankfully, there are evidence-based approaches like CRAFT and the invitation to change that can teach communication skills and positive reinforcement strategies that help everyone stay connected and make change possible. Not only do these strategies lead to better outcomes for the person using, they just feel better for families.
Particularly me as an engineer, because my world fits into two very neat categories. Things I can fix and things I haven't learned how to fix yet. You know, I don't want anybody telling me I can't help my son. You know, I want them to tell me, okay, it's going to be difficult, Dave, which I accept. It may not have a 100% success record, but this is what you can do to improve things. It's no rock bottom for the family members. It's a constant roller coaster ride, and one incident comes after the other. And just when you've got over that incident, another one arrives. So we're constantly running on adrenaline. That's a fight or flight reflex. It's never off, you know, and it does take its toll. And I was really struggling at work. I wasn't able to concentrate. I was probably a bit short-tempered, and people going, Dave's a miserable person today. What's wrong with him? You know, again, they didn't know what I was going through. And I found that, you know, peer support groups, and just, we used to go to a Buddhist meditation group, and just learning something new and sitting there and doing 90 minutes, 2 hours, just doing something completely away from the problem that we were having. And a lot of that was really helpful to us as well. It taught me to press my pause button. Meditation doesn't have to be a 20-minute session. You can take 3 breaths and reset yourself and go, right, I'm not going to react that way. I'm going to have a think. Maybe I won't react. Maybe I'll respond in this way instead, because that previous response wouldn't have worked.
I love my son dearly. I love to talk to him. I love to see him, but also engaging with him when it's the right time, because he gets very triggered. He gets very angry, very frustrated easily. And that is a certain trigger to me. It certainly sends my heart beating fast again. And it got to a point that I was struggling with anxiety, and so was Craig. And so because we were having a good conversation now one morning, and I thought, I can't do this today. And I said, Craig, you struggle with anxiety. And I said, you know, it's really difficult, isn't it? And I said, I'd just really love to know if you got any hints that, you know, you could give me. So I was giving him a little bit of confidence to help me for a change without saying to him, I'm anxious because of what you've just put me through. I was actually turned it round, and that really, really helped. And from then on, it was, I'm being a bit anxious today, Craig. And he said, Mum, I'm not going to bother you. And not that I ever said he did. I'm not going to bother you unless I really need to. So, yeah, and we just try day by day, don't we?
As Tina learned to press the pause button, she interrupted the reactive patterns that tended to escalate things with Craig. By opening up to Craig, rather than reacting to his behavior, she gave him a chance to respond in a new way. Also, when Dave and Tina gave Craig the space to problem solve on his own, they saw how their hard work and modeling was having a positive influence on him.
Craig's doing okay. I can't say he's off all substances. He's using cannabis, but he's reduced that massively, and he intends to stop. But there is, you can see when he gets very stressed and very anxious, you can see that is his go-to, you know, so that makes sense to us as well. But it's absolutely amazing how he's progressing. He's got a very dear friend called Andrew, and Andrew had been in recovery for 3 years. He lives in the same supported house as Craig. And the other week I came home, I'd been to my support group, and they said, Andrew's been drinking after 3 years. Craig's really distressed about it. So I rang Craig. You'd really talk well with him, hadn't you? Craig said, I'm taking the dog for a walk. I've got to stop and I've got to think about what I'm thinking and what I'm going to do. He's learned to press the pause button. He went away. He said, I'm really frightened because I'm worried he's going to be aggressive or something, because he'd never seen him drunk ever. So he's really worried about this. And he started talking about all sorts of things about what he was going to do when he got back home. He was going to make sure Andrew was safe. He was going to wait till tomorrow to talk to him. And all of the things that, you know, and he even understood why he'd been drinking. He said, do you know, Mum, he said he's had so much stress this week and he's had so much stress over the years. You know, I'm not surprised. And it was on the cards and I knew it was going to happen. And it was really strange. And I said, Craig, I am so proud of you. I said, you've not lost your temper. You've not shouted at him. You're doing all the things to keep him safe and you're showing kindness and compassion to him. And I said, I'm so proud of you. I said, have you been quietly coming to our groups? I said, because it feels like that, you know, you've learned all the things that we've been practicing on you, you know. And I said, we really do understand what you're going through. And I wasn't aiming at Craig, but we did understand what he was going through. And bless him, he turned round and he said, I know, Mum, I'm sorry. And I've never wanted him to say sorry. I mean, I've always wanted to see him get better and get healthy and everything. But it's almost like he recognised that that really hurt him and he must have done the same to us as well. Mm. And I said, you don't have to say sorry, Craig. I said, you know, we're just with you. We're here all night. I'll leave my phone on, just ring. The other thing he said is, he said, and he's got some more vodka in the room. And Dave said to him, he said, just leave it there, you know. And yeah, Craig said, what I'm going to do, Mum, he said, I want him to make that decision to throw that away himself. I'm not going to do it because that's not going to solve anything. So it was absolutely amazing.
Well, that's amazing that he responded very much using ITC and might not have had the language, but certainly had that model to him by the two of you. So that's really powerful.
And that's important, isn't it? That modelling, you know, in keeping our calm and not entering into those arguments. And, you know, it used to be like a tennis match between myself and Craig on the phone, and he'd say something and I'd defend it. And, you know, then he'd get more angry, and rather than de-escalating it, I'm very aware in the early days I was escalating it.
One of the things that comes up a lot in the groups is trust. And I think when we behave in a way that we're doing that Sherlock Holmes or Lieutenant Columbo interrogation every time they come in the door, who have you been with, how much money have you spent, all that controlling behaviour, it has an effect on their trust of us. You know, if every time they walk through the door, we're going to start lecturing them about drug use, that has an effect on their trust as well. And we often say in the family groups, what we hear in the family groups is that, oh, I don't trust them anymore. And they do it as a sort of one-way thing. And in Smart Recovery, they talk about the trust bank, where they compare it with a bank account. You know, if your trust in your loved one is depleted, yes, you can get that trust back, but it's going to take a while in the same way as it takes a while to pay off an overdraft. So what we did, we switched it round and we said, yeah, but what about their trust of us? What we've done is matched his recovery. So as he's started to recover and his behaviour's changed, we have started to trust him as well.
Trust can be a minute-by-minute calculation and a moment-to-moment decision. Dave and Tina made the decision to trust Craig in spite of all the reasons they had not to. It sent Craig the message that they knew he could change. As Dave and Tina admit, they've all changed a lot since this journey began, and that includes their son, Sean.
Sean is amazing. Well, Craig's amazing too, but Sean is amazing. And when they were growing up, they were the best brothers. And Craig to this day will say, I'd put my life down for Sean. Craig really cares about Sean. Sean has found it very challenging because he's seen all of the stuff right at the beginning, which was probably the hardest because we didn't know how to cope. Craig didn't know how to cope. So he saw all of the yucky stuff, I'd call it. You know, he was studying A-levels and he wanted to be a doctor, but he just completely, it just freaked him out. And he missed a whole year of his A-levels and had to resit another year. So little by little, because we learnt the skill to support him. And I thought, no, there's 4 people in this family. You know, we've all got to be looked after. And he is now a radiotherapist. So he's treating cancer. He's got a beautiful girlfriend, really, really happy. He still sees his brother, but I know sometimes there's still that sort of hurt there, because siblings is such a massive thing, isn't it? Because they lose their first best friend, don't they? They lose their big brother. We tried to fix it in the early days. We tried to sort of fix it, but we realised really they had to make their own way together.
I can relate to Sean in a way, because I think when my dad died when I was 15, I didn't have the tools because I wasn't old enough to deal with that. And I think Sean had a similar trauma, seeing his brother behaving the way he was behaving. And that trauma is carried along. And there's also the stigma for him as well.
And I have to say, the people that we were in 2008, which I believe we were good people and very enthusiastic people, and the people that you sit in front of you now, we're different people. It's made us better people. I think we've got some wisdom. We've never been argumentative, but I think, you know, nowadays we're just so calm and peaceful together. It's just a pleasure to be together. And, you know, and if one of us is having an off day, if something's triggered us, I'll say, oh, Dave, you know, you can wake up and you feel quite tearful over nothing. And I'll say, you know, I'm feeling really rubbish today. And Dave said, can I help? Is there anything I can do? And I'll say, no, I just need to go and sleep for 2 hours. Yeah, go ahead. Or Dave will need your own space. And I think it's important of being together, supporting each other, as well as giving each other a little bit of space as well, and encouraging to do things for yourselves as well. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I think definitely with me is I've learned how to listen. Yeah, which is, you know, for fellas and dads, you know, so all the wives out there will say, men don't listen properly. And that's been a huge thing for me. So I'm not fixing everything and reacting. I'm stopping and I'm listening, and I'm letting Tina say what she has to say, and I'm letting my sons, both of my sons, say what they have to say, and not feeling like I need to give them an answer.
Is that a relief for you not to have the answers all the time?
Absolutely. And it's also part of us running a group as well, you know, because just to go in there and go, you've got no idea who's going to arrive at this group or what stories they're going to arrive with. And some of them are pretty, you know, worrying. I don't need to know the answer to these problems. And it's really, really helpful.
And I think, if you do you mind me saying, I think you definitely have learned the listening skills. You've always listened, but not necessarily heard. And I think, you know, when I say to Dave, I think we need to go and see Craig because I'm worried about him. I think in the past you might say, no, we're not going. And nowadays he understands why I might need to do that, you know, to help me cope with it, and vice versa.
So my final question for you all is, what is your hope for our listeners?
My hope for your listeners, if they're in the position that we've been in or are in, is don't be worried about asking for help. Don't feel that you're going to join any groups like this and be judged. You know, we've all been there. I think it's really sad when people don't reach out for help. I mean, we have a lovely little group, but we know we want to reach out more and more and more to people. So yeah, just we know how much a big step it is to join a group or get help. But the first step is the biggest. And once you've done it, we can move forwards.
I think my message would be for the recovery services, really, because I don't think they understand the importance of family training and family support and the role that families can make in the recovery of their loved ones. And I certainly I've noticed in recovery groups that, you know, people can go through detox and go through recovery, and when they leave that particular environment, the establishment they're in, the world hasn't changed. So I think really, there needs to be more family support so that when people leave recovery, their families are on their side, understand more about addictive behaviour. And we need to get away from the message that families are powerless over addiction. Fair enough, we can't climb inside their heads and take over the controls and steer them away from their drugs, but we can be the reason they choose recovery. We can be really, really nice parents. And, I've heard this over and over in the groups as well, is in recovery groups, if you ask them who's your support network, there's a day and night difference between the people with supportive families and the unfortunate people that don't have support from their families. And they remember that. They may not at the time say it to their own families, but they do remember it, and it does have a lasting impression on them that their families stuck with them through thick and thin.
And I would say also, in addition, that don't give up hope. If we can use these strategies and, share our experiences and learn from other people, you will see that there is hope. So we never thought the worst, did we? We felt hopeless and helpless. But as you can see, we're feeling so much better now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's heartwarming to hear that Craig's behavior continues to stabilize and that Dave and Tina have found such peace following years of turmoil.
For Dave, groups are a huge source of enthusiasm and a productive focus for his energy. For Tina, she needed to learn how to step back at times and how to practice self-compassion, especially in moments of crisis. Ultimately, by pressing the pause button, she gave both herself and Craig the space to heal.
Craig's even attending his own support group, something Dave didn't think he'd ever do. Craig's group is full of men, paramedics, cops, and ex-military. It's not explicitly about substance use, even if they cover that sometimes too. It's a bit crass, and it's very real. It wouldn't work for everyone, but it's working for Craig.
Since the pandemic, Dave and Tina give back by leading mutual support groups for other families like themselves. By sharing everything they've learned with warmth, honesty, and generosity, as they have today, Dave and Tina overcome the stigma that many face in both the substance use disorder and mental health space. We thank them for sharing their story with us. When people experience community, it's powerful and gives them a sense of belonging and hope.
Together, we heal.
Our hearts are with you.
Rethinking Rock Bottom is a production of CMC Foundation for Change. If you're looking for more support, visit cmcffc.org.